Due process is a legal and ethical concept. I will discuss due process from the perspective of educators. Questions of due process are not usually directly concerned with the fairness of the decision itself, but with the fairness of the process used to reach it. Due process is the nature of fair procedures for making decisions. The central element of due process is the idea of rationality, and it requires equal regard to all sides. It also requires that all appropriate evidence must be considered. One aspect of due process is the idea of notice. If the educators are to be judged according to the quality of their performance, they must know the standards by which they are judged, because it's unreasonable to hold educators to a standard of which they are ignorant. The second aspect of due process is the rational requirement that standards be consistently applied. The standards must be absolutely clear. They must be known in advance and consistently applied, which brings us to the aspect of consistency. For the standards to be applied consistently, it helps if the educator performs consistently. For example, an educator who habitually covers the TEKS objectives, that's the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, day in, day out, every month of every year, should receive consistent evaluations from year to year. The third component of due process is that decisions be made on the basis of reasonable evidence. Procedures should be followed that make evidence available in a systematic format. For example, the principal who habitually visits every classroom daily, even if it's unannounced, creates a consistent behavior which strengthens due process because he gathers systematic evidence. This is much more reliable than standardized testing scores that must show that differences in scores are due to differences in teaching ability, rather than the obvious understanding. There are differences in students who are assessed one day each school year. We know that student scores are not entirely consistent because students are not alike. They do not learn the same. A final feature of due process is the rational connection to a legitimate purpose. Often, due process standards are simply procedures for evaluating and collecting evidence. The standards that are used to judge an educator or their performance must have a rational connection to a legitimate purpose. Remember, rationality demands that reasonable decisions are made by using clear standards. Reasonable decisions are made by using adequate evidence. The evidence collected must be reliable. It must be reasonable, especially where there is a hearing concern and witnesses are cross-examined. That evidence better be legitimate. For example, rumors, hearsay, and anonymous notes are unacceptable evidence, and the standards must be consistently applied. Due process requires that administrators make reasonable decisions by following rational procedures that generate reliable evidence and consistent judgments, because equals must be treated equally.